David Bowie's remarkable career was a kaleidoscope of reinvention, collaboration, and cultural innovation. Despite his constant evolution, there was always an underlying clarity to his choices, whether embracing a new sound or declining a request that didn't fit his vision.
Well, I don't know why he's doing music. This music's as bad as his painting. I thought, I'm going to like this. So I'd never heard anything quite like it. It was a revelation to me.
It's this ability to say no with the same precision and thoughtfulness as he said yes that shaped his legacy not only as an artist, but also as a cultural tastemaker.
Lights were low, oh, oh. I leaned back on my radio, oh, oh.
This isn't the story of the collaborations Bowie embraced, but rather the bands he refused, a reflection of his standards, instincts, and, dare we say, his impeccable sense of propriety. The Red Hot Chili Peppers provide perhaps the most emblematic example of Bowie's respectful rebuffs.
Seeing Anthony again from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I haven't seen him in 5-6 years, maybe longer. And being here, of course, in Toronto.
The funk rockers have built a career on resilience, a quality they demonstrated in spades when repeatedly attempting to enlist Bowie as a producer. Frontman Anthony Kiedis described the saga with a mixture of wistfulness and admiration. In the beginning, we would call him, and he would say no, respectfully. Not just respectfully, but with what Kiedis hinted were carefully crafted refusals. He wrote us extremely thoughtful, kind letters explaining why he couldn't, whether he was busy or just into something else at the moment. Undaunted, the band tried again and again. Their persistence would have been admirable if it weren't so futile. They pleaded with him to produce By the Way, a record brimming with melodic ambition, and later approached him for Stadium Arcadium, a sprawling double album that could have benefited from Bowie's sharp editing eye.
Yeah, there have been times when we've all been a bit dictatorish and it did not serve the band as a whole. I think we're going to last a lot longer if we keep it painfully democratic.
We wrote long emails explaining everything and why it was time for us to really get our ships on, Kiedis recounted. But despite their efforts, Bowie's answer was unwaveringly consistent. While Kiedis insisted, no is a reasonable answer, the band's obvious disappointment lingered. It's a testament to Bowie's charm that even his refusals became a badge of honor for those on the receiving end. If the Peppers were persistent to the point of heartbreak, Coldplay's encounter with Bowie was a study in brevity. The band, then riding the crest of their early success, boldly sent Bowie a demo, envisioning him as the guest vocalist on a song. His response? It's not a very good song, is it? Brutal, perhaps. But Bowie's honesty was never gratuitous. He wasn't one to mince words, especially when it came to something as personal as music. Will Champion, Coldplay's drummer, later reflected on the rejection with a surprising degree of respect. He was very discerning. He wouldn't just put his name to anything. This rejection, brief as it was, speaks volumes about Bowie's ethos. For an artist of his stature, there was no obligation to soften his feedback or offer platitudes. His critique wasn't malicious, but rather a statement of principle. If something didn't resonate with him, he wouldn't force himself into it. Coldplay, for their part, seemed to take the rejection in stride. Perhaps they recognized that Bowie's unwillingness to collaborate was, in its own way, an acknowledgement of his high standards. Standards that, by his own admission, he applied to himself just as rigorously.
Being hated, Fatty takes his own life.
Then there's Dave Grohl, the ever-enthusiastic frontman of the Foo Fighters, whose brush with Bowie illustrates not just a rejection, but also the artist's mischievous sense of humor. Grohl had long idolized Bowie, a sentiment shared by countless musicians. His admiration reached a fever pitch when the Foo Fighters performed at Bowie's 50th birthday celebration at Madison Square Garden in 1997, a night Grohl later described as surreal. When he walked, almost levitated on stage, I felt as if I were being visited by another life form, Grohl wrote, encapsulating the awe Bowie inspired in his peers. Years later, Grohl worked on a film soundtrack and, with Bowie in mind, decided to reach out. He emailed the singer, who responded with characteristic wit. "I'm not made for these times," Bowie quipped, politely bowing out. For most people, that would have been the end of it, but Grohl wasn't most people. He pressed on, perhaps mistaking Bowie's enigmatic response for a British maybe. Eventually, Bowie put an end to the exchange with a sharply definitive, "All right, now that's settled, then fuck off." Grohl later recounted the story with evident affection.
Love you, Dave.
Thanks, man. We all love you.
It took a beat for me to realize he was joking, or maybe he wasn't, but either way, it was the coolest no I've ever received. That final fuck off became a cherished memory for Grohl, encapsulating the complex dynamic of interacting with someone you admire so deeply. Even in Rejection, Bowie managed to leave an indelible impression.
A lot of it is awfully nice. I mean, they say, how's your baby and how's your wife and what's your mum's name and things like that. But some of them are worth framing.
What ties these stories together is Bowie's steadfast commitment to his creative integrity. For an artist as collaborative as he was, his no was as intentional as his yes. It wasn't that he dismissed others out of hand. On the contrary, he took the time to consider their requests, often responding with thoughtfulness and candor, but he was discerning about his time, his energy.
Having imbibed the more finer products of Swiss pharmaceutical company.
And most importantly, his art. Bowie once said, "For me, it wasn't always just about expressing my work. I really wanted, more than anything else, to contribute in some way to the culture I was living in." That contribution, by definition, required selectivity. Bowie's Rejections also highlight his understanding of influence, a concept he often spoke about with humility. I think what happens is you look at somebody and maybe something you had as a small seed in your own mind, you see that somebody has extended that or gone quite a long way with it, he said in an interview.
I think it's terribly dangerous for an artist to fulfill other people's expectations. I think they generally produce their worst work when they do that.
You think, yeah, that person is doing what I really like to do, so that kind of influence I'm proud of. It's a fascinating insight into how he viewed his role in the artistic ecosystem, not as a gatekeeper, but as someone deeply aware of the ripple effects of his decisions. In turning down bands like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Coldplay, and the Foo Fighters, Bowie wasn't just making choices about who to work with.
I don't miss the spectacle of doing shows like those one iota. They're such a nightmare to pull together. I mean, the responsibilities.
He was making statements about the kind of artist he wanted to be. His refusals were never dismissive, but rather a reflection of his unwavering dedication to his craft. In an industry often defined by compromise, Bowie's ability to stand firm set him apart. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about Bowie's Rejections is the way they were received. There's no bitterness in the stories told by Kiedis, Champion, or Grohl. If anything, their anecdotes are tinged with admiration, even gratitude. They understood that Bowie's no wasn't personal.
Automatically falling into areas that I'd not experienced.
It was a testament to his integrity. In a way, being turned down by Bowie was its own kind of validation, a recognition that he held his collaborations to the highest standard. Bowie's legacy as a cultural icon is often attributed to his fearlessness, his ability to push boundaries and redefine what it meant to be an artist. But just as important was his ability to say no, to projects that didn't align with his vision, to opportunities that didn't excite him, to ideas that didn't spark his imagination. His refusals were as deliberate and meaningful as his creations, a testament to the thoughtfulness with which he approached every aspect of his career. In the end, Bowie's story is one of discernment and conviction. He didn't just leave behind a catalogue of music, he left behind a blueprint for how to navigate a career with integrity. For those lucky enough to have been considered, and even for those who weren't, his choices remain a source of inspiration. After all, a no from Bowie was never just a rejection, it was an affirmation of his commitment to excellence. And in a world that often rewards compromise, that might be his most enduring legacy of all.